Welcome, everybody, to the Mindset Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Dial. If you have not yet done so, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another podcast episode. Today, I'm sitting down with my good friend and buddy, amazing author, self-published, now going into the traditional route. His name's Hal Elrod. If you guys don't know, Hal, I actually met back in 2006. He was on stage and was at a Cutco conference and talked about how he was a coach. And I was like, hey, I need a coach. So I hired him and his best friend, John Berghoff, in 2006 to be my coaches. And throughout the process, he started a podcast, he wrote a book, and he wrote this book called The Miracle Morning, which you've probably heard of before. This is, in all honesty, probably the book that started everyone talking about having a morning routine about 10 or 11 years ago. And it's kind of crazy how I'll tell you a story about this. I remember when it first came out. Okay. I remember your first book, and I read your first book. And then I remember when this book came out. And it seemed like it was like gaining some traction, and you were pushing it, and you were pushing it. And then I was like, 2 or 3 years later, I was like, man, he's still pushing this book. Like, is it selling? Like, what's going on with it? But I think what happened is you probably saw what you saw. You were on stage, you saw people coming up to you, you saw the ground, like the grassroots of how it was moving. Yeah. And so throughout, you've wrote this book now 10 years ago, and you've basically, as you told me, almost rewrote the entire book with the same shell. So it was originally 150 pages. It's now around 220 pages. And the cool thing about it is when you wrote the book 10 years ago, it was when you were kind of new at Miracle Morning. Yeah. And now it's like you have 10 years of, actually more than 10 years of you doing it personally.
15 years of me doing it and 11 years of other people doing it.
And it's not bullshit, which is what I love about it. It's not like you're one of the people who like says do this and you don't do it. I've been to a Dave Matthews concert with you and your wife. And halfway through Dave Matthews, Ursula, your wife, goes, we got to leave, Miracle Morning. So it's actually something that you really, truly do. And it's not like you just preach it and don't follow through on it. So what made you decide to rewrite the book, add more to it, and now have these stories of seeing it change people's lives? Why is now the time to do this after selling 2 million copies on your own?
Yeah. It's so when I was writing The Miracle Morning, and to your point, like I started doing The Miracle Morning in 2008. I started sharing it with my coaching clients, and like the light bulb went off after a few months. I'm like, this is changing people's lives, and most of them were complaining that like, I'm not a morning person, Hal. I'm like, I know, neither was I. Try it. Yeah. And then what ended up happening is the feedback is like, oh my gosh, it's changing my life. And I went, if it's changing their life and they weren't quote unquote morning people, and it's changed my life and I wasn't a morning person, this could change the world, right? This should change anybody's life. And I felt a sense of responsibility, like I have to share this. Right. And so I have to write a book. And I'm a slow writer. It took me 3 years to write The Miracle Morning. Nobody knew I was. I self-published it, right, 2012. But during that process, the big book, the most famous book at that time was 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Yeah. And 2 years after he wrote that book, which I loved, right? I read it, I reread it, I talked about it, I shared it. He wrote the 4-Hour Workweek updated and expanded edition. And so even though I was literally writing the original edition, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Maybe one day in the future, I'll write an updated edition of this book I'm currently writing. Yeah. And there's two things. Number one is, I always say The Miracle Morning elevates your consciousness as a human being. Like it helps you be more aware and intentional about how your thoughts, your words, and your actions are impacting your life and the lives of every person that you touch. Friends, family, colleagues, whatever, right? Whoever you're influencing through your interactions, you're becoming a better version of yourself from the Miracle Morning practice. And so in the last 15 years of doing The Miracle Morning and 11 years since the book published, I would hope that my consciousness is elevated. I'm much more aware and intentional. Yeah. And I've been interacting with, millions of, not literally millions, but there's millions of Miracle Morning practitioners, and I've interacted with tens of thousands of them over the last decade, and I've learned so much, not only in the way my own practice has evolved, but from members of the community, right? Like, oh, that's a brilliant idea, that's great. And I've gone, to meditation retreats and really deepened. Like when I wrote the book, it was very much like, hey, if you're new to meditation and affirmations, I'm kind of new, but I'm like a level above, if you will. Yeah. Here's how you do them. And now it's like, oh, I didn't know what I didn't know back then.
You've been doing it for 15 years.
For 15 years. Yeah. And so this book, I literally went through and I rewrote every page from a higher level of consciousness, if you will, right? And I added over 70 pages of brand new content, including 2 of the biggest requests have always been, or one of the biggest requests is always, when you can do the miracle evening. Like, what's your miracle evening? And I used to be embarrassed, like I didn't have much of an evening ritual.
Yeah.
And then I kind of realized studying that wait, how you end the day might be almost as important as how you begin the day.
For sure.
And so the Miracle Evening is a 20 plus page chapter now. And then the book I've had on my heart the last 2 years that I've been working on as I've been rewriting this is called The Miracle Life. And that book, I didn't want to wait to give that content to the world. So there's a 20 plus page chapter called The Miracle Life. And that's really about a paradigm for personal fulfillment, a path to inner freedom. Like, look, we've all been blessed with one life. I think at the end of our lives, we're going to look back and go, man, I wasted so much energy being stressed, afraid, depressed, worrying about stuff that just life happened. Why didn't I enjoy every moment of that one life I was blessed to live? And that's what The Miracle Life is. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's it's really interesting because it's like it's such like if somebody hasn't read The Miracle Morning, it's funny because I feel like it's huge and like everybody's read it. And then you look at it, it's like 2 million is a lot, but there's so many people that haven't read it.
8 billion that we still have to reach.
There's a lot of people that haven't. And so the thing about it is it's crazy because it's such an anomaly to sell, 100,000 copies self-published. To do 1 million copies self-published is even crazier, but to do 2 million shows you like there's something about this book that's connected with people, that's changed people's lives. And that's what's so awesome about the whole thing is that like, I don't know if you ever sat back and been like, holy shit, 2 million copies self-published is like one of the rarest things that you could possibly do as far as an accomplishment. So that's a huge thing. And I want you to realize that is like, it's amazing that you have done that.
Dude,
good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
For sure. But what I really want to know about is like, what's the difference in like, okay, so you went through and there was Hal who wrote it and you were how old when you first wrote it?
Yeah, 27, 28 when I started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're how old now?
44.
44. So it's like, okay, anybody out there is like, if you wrote a book at 26, 27, 28, you have that knowledge that's there, but an extra 15 years, 16 years of knowledge and wisdom that you've gotten from it. What do you feel are some of the biggest changes or adjustments that you made to the book that's different where you read it and you're like, man, this is good, but I'm so young and there's like parts of it where you're probably like, oh man,
they're cringeworthy.
Right?
Like it's kind of like when you hear your voice like on video from a few years ago, you're like, oh my God, turn that off. I can't.
I sound so nasally.
Yeah. When I reread my book, I'm like,
what is this?
How immature. This is so cheesy. I've wondered, that's another selfish reason I've wanted to rewrite it for a long time is when I read it, I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm like, how do people take this seriously, right? How is this sold 2 million copies? Like, literally.
Why are people buying this?
I mean, literally, I'm like embarrassed and I'm like, I want to rewrite this right now. And luckily, well, here's what's interesting. As a self-published author, one of the benefits is I've uploaded a new version of the book, like not a completely updated book, but I've gone through and I have like, because I read, there's 32,000 reviews on Amazon now.
Yeah, it's
I haven't
crazy.
read all of them, but I have read many thousands. And I always wanted to look like I'd read not just the 5-star to be like, oh, people like it.
Right.
But I'd read the 1, the 2, the 3-star, almost more so, and go, what are the common themes where I didn't quite hit the mark, or I was tone deaf in these areas. And so over the last 11 years, I've updated, I think 3 times where early on, like after a year or two, I was like, okay, multiple people are saying this same thing. And so I would go in and I would change those parts and then I'd upload a new PDF to Amazon and there'd be a new book, right?
Nice.
So I was able to slightly do that over the years, but now it was literally going through it took about 8 months for me to rewrite, like 8 months of writing every day as if it were a new book to rewrite it. And then my editor, who is also the CEO and founder of BenBella, my publisher, I mean, he was like, I want this book to be the best it can be. So Hal, I don't usually do this. He's like, I'm actually going to be your editor. I was like,
that's awesome.
That's amazing. And he was amazing. And so what was great is he would actually go, some of the stuff I rewrote, he actually would say back, he's like, okay, so this part, way better. You went too far off on the rewrite.
Right.
Like I think you should change this back to how it was. So there's some parts for sure that like the way I told a story is like you told it better initially.
There's obviously some magic that's there that you don't want to take the magic out of it.
And that was actually a fear too, right? It's like, okay, this book, it works.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not fixed, don't fuck
it up.
Literally, I labeled. Rob, this is funny. So a little bonus tip for people. the Word document, the Microsoft Word document, the manuscript that I was rewriting, I labeled it, if it's not broken, don't, TMM, for the Miracle Morning, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Like literally just to remind me, don't change too much. But I'll give you an example. So when I wrote that, meditation was new to me when I wrote the first version.
Yeah.
I've developed this meditation that I call emotional optimization meditation. I don't know if I made it up or it's in my subconscious from someone else. I think I made it up, but it's rather than just clearing your mind, it's actually identifying what's the optimal mental and emotional state that I need to be in today that would serve today. And maybe if it's on the weekends with your kids, it's I need to be playful, right? Or maybe if you had a fight with your spouse, it's I need to be at a pace of like love and forgiveness. Or on an average day, what you would teach is like I need to be focused today, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I identify what's the number one mental and emotional state that I need to embody today. And then I use different techniques to get into that state. Then I set my meditation timer and I like the word marinate. Like I meditate or marinate in that state. So I'm programming my central nervous system, my subconscious, to embody it. And then now I can show up at my best for the people I love, the people that I lead in that state, whether it's for my kids or my wife or my clients or whatever, right? So that's an example. Like there's a detailed, in-depth part of that.
You're like a chicken in a plastic bag. You're just marinating during that meditation, huh? That's what you're doing.
That's it.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that idea. So you were continuing. I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's the way I think about it, where it's actually like, I hear so many times that people are like, I struggle with meditation. But if you think about it, instead of like, I'm going to turn my brain off, it's like, I'm going to use my brain to think about how I emotionally want to feel throughout the day. And just like dropping a chicken inside of some lemon pepper inside of a bag, I'm just going to marinate in that for the next 15 minutes.
That's it.
So okay. So you're continuing about how you use it.
Yeah. And by the way, feel free. I'm long-winded, so you interrupt anytime that you want.
No worries.
So yeah, the other one is affirmations. Affirmations is my favorite. And in fact, let me back up for anybody new to the Miracle Morning. So the Miracle Morning is made up of 6 practices, right? You know this, but in case anyone doesn't. So it's silence. So by the way, the 6 practices are the SAVERS, the acronym SAVERS. Silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. And if you look at those are the 6 most timeless, proven personal development practices in the history of mankind. Like that, that the world's most successful people, from Olympic athletes to, multimillionaire entrepreneurs to you name it, that they have sworn by for centuries, right? I didn't invent any of them, but according to Robert Kiyosaki, he said, Hal, before the SAVERS, no successful person I'm aware of did all 6 of these. They might have done 1 or 2, maybe 3. Yeah. He said, but the way you packaged them and made it so easy to go through and do all 6 of the most timeless practices. But affirmations is my favorite of the practices. Like whenever somebody's like, do you have a favorite of the SAVERS? I always joke it's like politically correct to be like, no, they're all equally important. You need all of them.
They're just like my children.
Yeah,
I love them all equally.
I love them all equally. But I'm like, honestly, it's affirmations, because the way affirmations have been taught for maybe decades by self-help, they're corny. Yeah. It's one of 2 problems. Either we're taught to tell ourselves something we wish were true that's not true to us, right? Like, I am a millionaire, right? If you're struggling financially, you're like, I am financially free.
And your bullshit meter's going off the whole time.
Your subconscious is like, dude, you're lying. What do you do? You're lying, right? And now you're creating an unnecessary internal conflict as if we don't have enough of them. The second problem is we're taught to use this flowery, passive language that makes us feel better in the moment, because it's like this imaginary, everything's going to get better. Great example. I am a money magnet.
Right. I hate that.
Money flows to me effortlessly and in abundance, right?
Yeah.
And so I teach affirmations in this very specific, tangible, measurable way. Yeah. So in that book, like it's like a masterclass affirmations workshop, because the original book, I thought I taught it well enough, but it wasn't deep enough, where people are like, I don't get it. Like, how do I get affirmations are hard for me? And I'm like, so again, an example of like, I was able to, it's like, there's like 17 pages, I think, just on affirmations.
Oh my God.
Don't quote me, I'm making that up, but it's like, it's this really long, and then I give examples, and then, so.
That's awesome. So it's SAVERS. So in the last S is scribe, which stands for journaling.
Scribing, journaling.
Yeah. And so it makes sense. So it wasn't Saver J or Saver J.
Saver J. It was originally, literally when I was writing the book, it was Saver plus J. And that bothered me. And I was telling my wife one day, I remember the moment I met her in the hallway. She goes, you look frustrated. What's up? I'm like, I've got this acronym, but it's like not really a complete acronym. And it's kind of, and she goes, why don't you get a thesaurus and see if there's another word for journaling?
It's perfect.
And it was scribing. And I'm like,
It works.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that I like about it though is, and that's kind of what you said, is that there's 6 practices that you use. And these are 6 practices that if anybody implemented any of them into their life, it would start to work with them. So it's like silence, sitting there in silence and meditating, doing affirmations, doing visualization, doing exercises, doing reading, doing journaling. All of those things are going to help you in some sort of way. But what you've kind of done is said, hey, if you wake up an hour early, and there's 6 of them, take 10 minutes each and just do each one of them.
Or 30 minutes early, do 5 minutes each.
Right.
Or 6 minutes early,
and do
there's
1 minute
a 6-minute miracle morning. Literally, like that's a whole chapter in the book on, you can get it
so you can do it at any point in time.
Yeah.
What's the importance, I'm curious, of doing all of them at one time in the morning versus just saying, well, I'm going to pick 2 or 3 of them?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that question and another question that is kind of could be wrapped into it, which is a lot of people say, okay, the savers, I'm sold. Like doing the 6 most timeless personal development, sure. But why in the morning? Can I do them? I'm not a morning person. Can I do them in the afternoon or the evening, right? And here's the answer is they'll benefit you in the afternoon or in the evening. But when you do them first thing in the morning, there's immediate benefits, right? When you meditate, it lowers your cortisol levels. There's over 1,400 scientific studies that prove the benefits of meditation. In fact, that was like 10 years ago. There's probably 10 times that many studies, right? So if you wait to meditate until the evening, you missed out on lowering your cortisol levels and gaining mental clarity, right? And so when you do affirmations, they focus your mindset on what you're committed to, what you're capable of, what you're going to do to get where you want to go. That directs your focus for the day. If you wait till the evening, you've missed out. And if you exercise in the morning, right, more energy. So all of the savers benefit you immediately, and then there's a lasting benefit after. So when you start your day with a miracle morning, you put yourself in a peak physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual state to win the day. And so that's why first thing in the morning. So that's the big picture answer. And then in terms of doing some in the morning, some later, I think that's fine. Like the beauty of the miracle morning, there's a whole chapter toward the end of the book on customizing the miracle morning to achieve your goals. And if you just wake up and do one of the savers, that's still a miracle morning, right? You're missing out on the benefits of the others. But yeah, so I don't think there's a problem with doing some in the morning. What I always share in the book, it ends with a 30-day challenge, or now it's a 30-day journey, because I say in the new book, I'm like, we have enough challenges. Let's go on a journey together, right?
For sure.
But I say just do all 6. And for the 30-day challenge or 30-day journey, and then you won't know what you don't know if you don't do all 6 in the morning. And then you might be like, I actually want to do the exercise first. Like for me now, I start every morning with 60 seconds of jumping jacks. Just because it gets the blood flowing to my brain. Now I'm thinking clear. My brain's turned on. And then I do a full workout at the end of the miracle morning. I go out to the gym, and I work out. But yeah, so it's like doing all of them in the morning. Then you'll know which ones benefit you the most, which ones you might go, you know what, I'm actually going to move this one to after lunch, or I'm going to double it up and a lot of people say they'll do savers in the morning and they'll do like a mini savers later in the day or in the evening. So
what's some of, when you first wrote the book, obviously it was like, you had a little bit of experience with some of your coaching clients, and that was like a small sample size. But now you have this massive sample size. You have 38,000 reviews or whatever it is that came in, 2 million copies sold. I'm sure you get emails all the time. There's people that download your app. There's all of this. What are some of the stories that were just like, holy shit, I can't believe this actually happened from someone just waking up and implementing savers into their day?
Yeah. And there's so many, right? And I just went through, to put them all, the new ones in the book. But they're really profound. And this is, let me say this. When you said, man, it's been like 3 years, Hal's still talking about Miracle Morning? This is why. Because I was still reading every new Amazon review that came in. It's like, oh my gosh, I was depressed for the last 6 months. I read this book. I'm on day 14, my 30 challenge. I'm not depressed anymore. Like this has changed my life. And I'm like, how could I not keep talking about this and sharing it with as many people as I can? So I really think this is my life's work. Like I've written other books and such. So here's some of the stories. So Mike Eaton, and for those that don't know, there is a Miracle Morning movie, right? There's a documentary. And so we featured some of the stories in that movie. One of them was Mike Eaton. Mike Eaton had been obese his entire life, made fun of in high school. And he had tried diets, nothing worked. Friends like, hey, read the Miracle Morning, not to lose weight, but just read the Miracle Morning. The Miracle Morning, when he applied all the savers, he created affirmations like, I want to weigh this much. I'm committed to do these things so that I can lose the weight. And then, right, he visualized himself eat all of the things. Within it's been a long time since I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but it's something along the lines of within his first 2 months of doing the Miracle Morning, he lost something like 50 pounds.
Wow.
And now he's down like 80 pounds from like 330, I think, to 250, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he credits it's because of the Miracle Morning. Mm-hmm. So that's something where I wouldn't imagine losing weight. Another guy who's in the movie, Keith Minnick, and he's in the book, Keith, his son died at 3 hours old, right? So they had a child born and the child died 3 hours later.
Wow.
And him and his wife both went into a deep depression. He was I believe he was the director of business development at Turner Home Broadcasting at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said basically he was disenfranchised with his work because he's like, what's the point? Why are we even doing this? Why should I live? It doesn't matter. And I think it was like a year of that. And he had read books on grief, right? Someone said, hey, try this thing, the Miracle Morning. It's changing my life. And in Keith's own words in the book, he talks about his very first Miracle Morning. He was like, oh, I'm in control of the way that I feel. Mm. I don't have to be depressed anymore over my son's death. Mm-hmm. I'm not depressed anymore. He goes, it didn't take months of the Miracle Morning. It was the first Miracle Morning where he completely shifted his paradigm around the way he was experiencing the death of his son. Mm. And then he talked about 10 years later, he still does the Miracle Morning every single day. And he talked about how it's evolved and he's evolved and it was like the best example of like how the Miracle Morning can change your life in one day and continue to be changing your life a decade later, right? And there's tons of stories of people that they finally overcame their procrastination and wrote that book that was on their mind. The Miracle Morning helped them start that business. It helped them, run a marathon. I mean, it's just, you name it. Here, let me say this. The way to put it is this. Whatever you want to accomplish in your life, when you apply the savers, the Miracle Morning every morning, you become the person that you need to be to accomplish that thing, whether it's losing weight, making money, transforming your marriage. It's really universal.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to if we just make it real basic, it's just being intentional with your life. And so many people are just so unintentional and they just wake up. And I did this for years, for years and years and years. I woke up and when I still worked for someone else and I had to drive into an office, I'd wake up, 15 minutes before I had to leave. I'd jump in the shower real quick. On the way there, I'd stop at Taco Cabana and I'd get some breakfast tacos and coffee. And then I'd roll into there and I'd been up for 30 minutes. And it was just but it was just as my first girlfriend I ever had, her dad used to always say to me, she used to always say, it's same shit, different toilet is all that it was, right? Yeah. It's just every day felt exactly the same. And just I could take yesterday and I could place it on tomorrow and all of it felt exactly the same. And I think the key to it is that you decide that you're going to, first off, wake up earlier, which is not always easy, or go to bed earlier so that you could do it. And it's easier to stay inside of your bed, but it's literally from the moment your alarm clock goes off, you go, I'm going to choose me today. Yeah. And so many people have not done that. I was interviewed yesterday on a guy's podcast who said it took him 50 years to wake up, but he was in depression and all of this stuff. And it's at some point he just went, you know what, I'm going to choose me. Yeah. And that's kind of what's important about it is it's all right, it's going to be important for me to wake up in the morning and for me to choose me and actually start to put some action into it. And instead of being reactive to the world, I'm going to be proactive and I'm actually start to put some intention into my life. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's how you start your day. This was Steve Pavlina, who wrote the book Personal Development for Smart People. He said, how you start your day sets the tone, the context, and the direction of the day you're able to create.
For sure.
And that's it.
Yeah. So then with this, I'm curious with your children, because what we were talking about and what I do want to talk about is how this is going into schools. So do your children do this with you? How old are your kids? First off, to people who don't know your children. Yeah, how old are they? And do they do the Miracle Morning with you? Have they resisted it? What does that look like?
Yeah, my daughter is 14, going on 20, 25. And my son is about to turn 11, right? So 14 and 11. And they do not do the Miracle Morning. We used to do the Miracle Morning when they were younger. And my daughter, as she became a teenager, was like, I don't do this anymore, Dad. And so it is interesting being a parent and seeing the phases, right? Yeah. Where I've talked to other parents where there are times where your child, you're like, whoa, who are you? Yeah. This isn't the person I've been raising. And you start to feel like they're slipping away and then they come back. It's really phases. And I remember seeing that when my daughter was I don't know, 7 years old, I think, and she was this all of a sudden went from being a sweet girl to just attitude and this and that. I'm like, Sophie, and nothing got through to her. And then it lasted for like a few weeks or a month.
Yeah.
And then she was being nice again. And I was like, you're so sweet. I was like, you know, there was a period there for a few weeks where you were really, she's like, Dad, that Sophia is gone and she is never coming back. And she has for sure come back. But you learn like
she's returned.
she returns and then she goes. Yeah. It's interesting. But so we've done the Miracle Morning through phases.
Yep.
I've tried to get my daughter to write the Miracle Morning for teens, the Miracle Morning for kids. And it's like, she will, then she won't. So it is funny. So when people are like, you know, how do you do the Miracle Morning with kids? I'm like, when you figure that out, I'm like, let me know, because I've actually struggled. And now I will say, there are many parents that it's almost embarrassing for you to be like, I'm not the parent that figured it out.
Well, no, the good thing about it, though, before you say it is like, because first off, the good thing that I like about it is that you're not forcing it onto your children.
Sure.
Which means they're most likely going to come back around to it and enjoy it because you're not forcing it onto them.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the best part. So you can finish what you were saying, but
yeah.
There's no reason to be like, oh my God, I'm the Miracle Morning, that my children should be like masters at this Miracle Morning
It's
thing,
also the closer you are. It's like, Dad's telling us to do this, right? So,
yeah. My wife doesn't listen to anything that I say.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have people that tune in and listen to this.
And it's the same with my wife. People go, how do you get your wife to do the Miracle Morning, or your spouse? I'm like, let me know when you figure that out. We've done probably 8 Miracle Mornings together in our entire life.
Oh my God, that's
There's
awesome.
been times where she's like, because when I was on Robert Kiyosaki's podcast years ago, him and his wife do the Miracle Morning, and he said, we grow close. It helps us grow closer so that we don't grow apart.
Oh my God.
And I sent that clip to my wife. And I'm like, hey, don't you want to go closer so we don't grow apart? And then she's like, yes, let's do Miracle Morning. And that lasted for like, a week or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she's like, but we're so close, right? She's like, I don't want to do your Miracle Morning thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I will say this. There is a book called The Miracle Morning for Parents and Families that I co-authored with Mike and Lindsay McCarthy. And I co-authored.
We're both awesome people. I know both of them.
Awesome people. They came up to me at an event, and she's like, hey, my son Tyler, and I think he was 6 at the time, and this was, I don't even know, he's probably 13, 14 now. She said, we do the Miracle Morning with our kids every day, and he wanted to share his affirmations with you. And I'm like, okay. And he comes up and he reads me his affirmations, and they were in alphabetical order, It's like, that's amazing. And I start talking. I'm like, how'd you get him to the Miracle Morning? And so they have an amazing system, and they do the Miracle Morning with their kids every day, and they have for like 7 years, So if you want to learn how to do it, Miracle Morning for Parents and Families. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the thing about it, man, is like, I see too many people, too many people try to push things onto their children. And the more that you push something onto somebody, the more they're going to resist it.
Yep.
That was the thing I realized with my wife when we first started dating, is I was like so into personal development. And I had this podcast, and I was like, I'd buy her books, and I'd be like, let's go to a conference. And she's like, no, I don't really want to. And then eventually after a few years, I was like, okay, she's just not into it. No big deal. I guess this is my thing. No, that's fine. Like some people like basketball, some people like football. It's like, it's just the way that it is. And so what was interesting, though, is then I stopped trying to push it. And then lo and behold, she came back around. She started doing her own routines. And so now we meditate every single morning. We have our own routines and stuff that we do. And so and now she's actually a coach, which is like crazy, because she wasn't in personal development all the first few years. And
she's great. I watch her on Instagram.
Yeah, she makes videos on Instagram, and I'm like, man, that was really good, And so I think it's good when you don't force it onto people, because different strokes for different folks. But
I agree.
The thing is, like, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, man, I've really told myself, because the amount of times that I've heard people say, I've been telling myself for 6 months I'm going to start a morning routine. I'm telling myself I want to do a morning routine, but I'm just not doing it. I'm going to finally wake up early. That's one of my things. If it's something that resonates with you, I think it's like, buy the Miracle Morning book, read it, take what you want from it, try it out. And as you said, do it for 30 days, go on a 30-day journey, because you can do anything for 30 days.
Yeah.
And if you just try it for 30 days and it works for you, continue to keep doing it. If you hate it, which you won't, but if you hate it, don't do it again.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think what people need to do is just try it and say, okay, I could do anything for 30 days. And if it's really important for me to change my life, why don't I just try it?
Well, and I'll tell you 2 things. One is, people always ask, like, what if I'm not a morning person, right? Or what do you say to someone that says I'm not a morning person?
Yeah.
I say, join the club.
Yeah.
We consistently, every time we send out a survey to the Miracle Morning community, which is, hundreds of thousands of people that are on the email list, we always ask, before Miracle Morning, before you read the book, were you a morning person? Did you consider yourself a morning person or not? And it's on average 72% of Miracle Morning practitioners say, I was not a morning person, and I never thought I could be one before I read the book. And when I wrote the book, that was my number one driving, guiding principle, is how do I get someone from I've never been a morning person and I don't even want to be one because I don't want to wake up early, to I'm doing the Miracle Morning for the rest of my life. Right. And so I think that is, the book literally holds someone's hand, both the psychology of it. Like, how do you shift that mindset and overcome the limiting belief? Go, I'm not a morning person. I've tried. It didn't work. And logistically, how do you set yourself up for success? Like, there's a whole chapter in the book on, it's called the snooze-proof 5-step wake-up strategy, right? Which is like, how do you overcome being, a lifetime snoozeaholic is what I call it, right? And one of those 5 tips is you move your alarm clock across the room. Because if when the alarm goes off, if you can reach over and turn it off while you're still, like 70% asleep, right? And just fall right back asleep, you're going to do it. Even for me, if I fall asleep at a hotel room and I have the alarm next to I will snooze like 5, and I don't even know I'm doing it, right?
For sure.
And that's me. But if the alarm clock, if you have to actually get out of bed and walk into your bathroom and turn it up, you're awake now. You're up.
Right.
And so that's like one of the 5, steps or whatever. But like that alone is a total game changer.
For sure.
Right. So
yeah, it's funny because are you familiar with who Rick Rubin is?
Yeah.
So he's like one of the most, people who don't know out there, he's like the best music producer that's ever existed.
Yeah. And his book, and he's also now one of the best-selling authors.
His book is amazing too.
Yeah.
And so but he was known for being a night owl. Like he told himself for years, he's like, well, I'm just a night owl. And he produced music until like 3 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd go to sleep and he'd wake up at noon.
Yeah.
And he thought for years, he was just like, I'm a night owl. That's just who I am. And then one day he's like, what if I just decided to stop being a night owl and just try to go to bed early? And he realized he wasn't actually a night owl. It was just that his circadian rhythms were just set incorrectly. And he just restarted it by deciding to be a morning person. So it's like everyone who stays up late is like, I'm just a night owl. And I think it's like, or you could stop having coffee at 5 o'clock PM and maybe you'd fall asleep earlier.
Yeah. And starting your Netflix at 11 PM.
Yeah. So I think it's an important aspect of it, of like, try it out and see if you are still a night owl after 30 days.
Yeah. Well, Pat Flynn, who hosts Smart Passive Income Podcast, right? I've always loved Pat from afar. And I reached out to him once when the Miracle Morning came out. I'm like, hey, Pat, I'm a huge fan. I'd love to be on your podcast. And he's like, sorry, we're not taking any guests. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe a year or so later, he reached out and he was like, hey, I keep hearing about Miracle Morning, Miracle Morning, Miracle Morning. You got to do Miracle Morning. He's like, so I'd love to have you on the show now. And I was like, yeah, that's amazing. And when I got on the show, I think it was before we started recording. It might have been when we were recording, but I think it was before. But anyway, he said, Hal, I'm not a morning person. I'm a night owl. And he said, I get my best work done at night. And he said, I wake up in the morning when my alarm clock is my kiddos. When they come in and start going, daddy, 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 that's when I wake up. So in my mind, I'm like, how am I going to convince this guy that has the most heartfelt alarm clock?
Yeah.
Right? Like, no. You shouldn't wake up by your children. You should wake up before them and just eliminate that from your life.
Yeah, with an annoying sound that startles you awake.
Yeah, not to mention, he's one of the most, he's as successful as he could be. He's running marathons. He's got a great family. He's a great dad. He's making, 7 figures. I'm like, how am I going to convince him to do Miracle Morning?
Right.
So I talked to him about what we've talked about today, right? And by the end of the episode, he's like, Hal, you've convinced me that I might be missing out on the next level of productivity by not starting my day with the savers. He's like, so I'm committing right now to you and my audience. I will do the 30-day challenge. I will document it on like social media. Like, come with me, everybody, and we'll see what happens. And I was like, amazing, right? And now he's in the Miracle Morning movie, like he is a Miracle Morning practitioner, right? And it changed his life. And I think he said, I forgot the stat, but it was on Instagram one day. He's like, it's increased my productivity by like 300%. Don't quote me, but it's something like that, And so that's someone who is full on night owl, had no reason that he needed to wake up early. And when he did, it actually enhanced his already awesome life. And Robert Kiyosaki was the same way, right? Worth $100 million, super successful, does the Miracle Morning. He said it transformed his marriage for the better. He lost I don't know the amount of pounds, but if you look at him pre-Miracle Morning, he is probably 50 pounds heavier. And now he's svelte, he looks healthy, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the thing that we were talking about right before we started, though, was how this is actually starting to get into schools, which I think is awesome because, and I was surprised you said actually the majority of them are actually elementary schools. It's all across the board, but elementary is actually where it's starting. So how did it start? Because you were telling me a story. And then what exactly is happening in schools with the Miracle Morning?
So totally organic. Brianna Greenspan, who is one of my closest friends, she was a coaching client before you were, I think, or after, I don't know. But when I was first when when I came with the Miracle Morning, she was one of the first people I taught it to. And she resisted. I'm not a morning person. I'm not. And then she is like the biggest advocate of the Miracle Morning. She started the Miracle Morning Clubhouse room, I don't know, a couple years ago. And somebody came into that Clubhouse room that was a principal. And she said, her name is Anisha Jacko. She said, I'm in New York City. I'm in one of the worst school districts, like poverty, stricken school district. We had one of the highest detention rates. Somebody gave me the Miracle Morning during the 2020 pandemic. My mental health I was struggling. And she said, I started doing it and it changed my life. And then I shared it with all of our teachers. I'm like, you guys, we got to do this together. So we did a 30-day challenge. All the teachers were like, this is amazing. How do we roll it out with the kids? So they started doing a 6-minute savers over the loudspeaker every morning. She would lead it.
That's awesome.
And every student would do a Miracle Morning to start their day. Their detention went from the highest rate in their entire, district or whatever, to almost no detention at all.
It's crazy.
I mean, I wouldn't believe it if she hadn't shown me the stats and I went out and visited her. So she shares this in the Clubhouse room, and Brianna's like, this is amazing. And another woman speaks up. She's like, hey, I'm a principal. Hey, can we exchange info? How do we roll this out in our school? And so totally organic.
Yeah.
Then over the next 12 months, Brianna brought the Miracle Morning to over 100,000 teachers and students in just New York City. This was last year. And now it's the #1 selling educational product in the largest city in America, or one of the largest cities in America.
Yeah.
And we're just starting. The state of Rhode Island now is looking at adopting it in their entire state curriculum.
Wow.
So, and here's the crazy part. I told you this. In 2016, this is a lesson in manifesting, y'all. And I am very skeptical at manifesting, but when this happens, I'm like, I guess it's a coincidence, but I've seen so many of these coincidences, I don't know.
Yeah.
In 2016, I wrote the 10-year vision for the Miracle Morning, right? And this is 2023, so we're 7 years into it.
Yeah.
And one of the components I wrote is that by 2026, the Miracle Morning is practiced in every school in America. And I was thinking, what are the benefits of, right? I know the adults that are practicing the Miracle Morning, how it's changing their life. How would that apply to a student? And I thought, well, if students are meditating every day and they're finding peace within themselves and they're reading affirmations that remind them that they are limitless and capable of anything. And I thought they could really overcome their limiting beliefs and their self-doubt and the insecurities they face and the fear, the things that cause them to bully other kids. I remember I literally wrote down, it could be bringing an end to bullying, right? So I wrote that down. But I actually left it at that. I didn't make a plan to how to get it in schools. Yeah. And then Brianna Greenspan ends up sharing it on the Clubhouse room with that principal. And then now it's spread through schools throughout New York City. Over 100,000 teachers and educators and parents have adopted the Miracle Morning, and it's spreading throughout the entire country. And it's amazing. And the reports we're getting are, bullying is down, detention is down, mental health is up, and it's gone beyond the book, where now we're creating this entire curriculum where Brianna and her team go into schools and they teach the teachers and the principals how to roll it out in their school with their students in their classrooms. Yeah. It's really cool.
Well, I know I have a lot of teachers that listen to me. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are going to hear this. So is there a way for, if someone's out there, they're a teacher, they're a principal, is there an email or some way to get in touch with your team then in that way?
So right now we'll start with email. We're building a website where schools can submit a request, but support at miraclemorning.com. Okay. And if you're like, hey, I heard the podcast, I'm a teacher, I'm a principal, I'm a parent, I'm really interested in bringing this to my school, I'll get in touch with Brianna or our team and we'll figure that out. Yeah. So thanks for asking.
For sure. Yeah. Cause I think it's important if it's obviously doing that much with the 100,000 kids, imagine if you could get out to the entire United States. And there's probably people out there that are listening that have schools. They're either part of a school, they're a teacher, they're a principal. Maybe there's people that are heads of school districts. And so if they read it, first off, I think the important thing is just buy it for yourself and read it. Yeah. And then if it changed your life, then you're going to go, shit, I should actually bring this to everyone else, which is exactly what happened with that principal, which I think is important. Yeah. Last thing I want to bring up is something that was really life-changing for me. And it's on topic, but a little bit off topic. And I remember years ago, you used to have bracelets, and I used to have the bracelets. And I want you to tell a story just for people, because I think this is a really good way to wrap up and just have people understand it, of where it came from, the whole 5-minute rule, everything that came along with it, And because I think it was a story of you bought a new car, right? Like that's how the whole thing came up in the first place. You had a new car, and then some things happened with it, and then your wife, who was I think it's your girlfriend at the time, was like, "Why are you not more pissed off?" So I don't want to give the whole thing away, which is why I'm being very vague in it.
Yeah.
But can you tell that story and kind of what you learned from it? Because I think it's really important for people to listen to and go, "Oh man, like I can implement this into my day immediately."
Yeah. First part, I'm not sure which story you're talking about.
The one where you were driving your car. It was your dream car, right?
Yeah.
And didn't you get into a car accident? And your wife was like,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you know that one?
Yeah,
Is that?
yeah. Okay.
I know your stories. Listen, you've been in a few car accidents.
Yeah.
So for anybody who doesn't know Hal's story, because we didn't talk about it at all, like you've already been dead before, which is crazy. You've been in a coma. You've been told you weren't going to walk. You got past all of that. And so that's a whole other thing that we didn't even have time to go into today. But it was the idea of the 5-minute rule and can't change it, and just sharing how people can take that into their day today.
So one of the most important lessons I've ever learned, it's called the 5-minute rule, and I also call it the can't change it philosophy.
Yeah.
And it started when I was in sales. We learned on our second day of training at Cutco, where we've had our history. But my manager essentially said sales is a microcosm for life in terms of adversity.
Yeah.
He said most people face rejection every once in a while, rarely. He said you're going to face it every day, multiple times a day.
All the time.
And you have to have a tool to deal with rejection, with failure, so on and so forth. He said, so when things don't go your way, most people, they dwell on it, they get upset, it ruins their day, it ruins their week, it ruins their month, or even people are suffering. Many of us are suffering over things that happened like a decade ago when we were children, right? Like the trauma that we experienced, so on and so forth. And so he said, you need a tool, you need a strategy to move through adversity quickly, mentally and emotionally, so you can just keep going, right? And he taught us the 5-minute rule. And he said, when something goes wrong, and again, this was in the context of, someone canceling their order or not showing up to an appointment or you not reaching your goal for the week. But I ended up applying this to the biggest, most life-threatening, seemingly insurmountable challenges I ever faced, from my car accident to cancer and so on and so forth. And I use it in traffic every day.
You've had cancer too. God, you've had so much shit you've gone through in your whole life. You've died, you've been in a coma, you've had cancer. So almost died a few times. So this is important, like as you're going into it.
Yeah.
So you have been dead for 6 minutes. Right? So you're dead for 6 minutes. You were in a coma. A few years ago, I completely forgot you had cancer, overcame cancer, and it's a very rare form of cancer that not a lot of people live from, right? It's like
I was given a 20 to 30% chance of surviving.
Super low. And so you can, if somebody can do it and like their boss is an asshole and something happens, they can use this in their life. You use this for like the biggest events that happen. And so I just want to bring that in for people to understand, like, you actually truly live this way. Yeah,
this is whether you are using this to deal with traffic and not letting it bother you. Basically, it's how to not let anything outside of you affect your internal state. That's what this is, right?
Perfect.
And you can apply it. And I kind of feel like God has put me through these life-threatening experiences
just to challenge you to make
sure that most people can be like, okay, all right, if he was hit by a drunk driver, found dead at the scene, told he would never walk again, broke 11 bones, and this worked to not let that bother him.
And then had cancer
and did it again. And like, okay, I don't have anything going on that's too much worse than that, right? So the 5-minute rule, again, taught in training, and he said, when something goes wrong, you set your timer for 5 minutes on your phone, and you give yourself 5 minutes to fully experience the emotions that are coming up for you. If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're frustrated, if you feel hate, whatever it is, you give yourself 5 minutes to fully express and feel those emotions. Don't suppress them, which is what some of us will do, right?
Sure.
So we either dwell on them indefinitely, or we suppress them, and then they come out sideways later, either as cancer or yelling at our spouse, or we get depressed or whatever, and it's because it all pent up. So 5 minutes, and you feel your emotions. And when I first learned that, I was like, 5 minutes isn't long enough. Like, I need longer, right?
Yeah.
And so he said, after the 5 minutes go off, you say 3 really powerful words. And that's what that wristband that you mentioned used to say. Can't change it. Can't change it. It's an acknowledgement. Okay, I can't change what happened 5 minutes ago. So right now I have a choice. I can continue to dwell on it and be upset about it. It doesn't change anything. It just messes up my mental and emotional state. Or I can accept life exactly as it is. I can go, okay, can't change it. It happened. I'm going to accept it. I might not be happy about it, but I'm going to be at peace with it, because what other choice do I have?
Right.
And so it's either I'm upset, I continue that, or I accept it and I can just move on. And so when I first learned it, I'm like, 5 minutes isn't long enough. And the first time I remember, this lady didn't show up to her appointment, and I was like, I set my timer for 5 minutes. I'm bitching and moaning and stewing. I'm like, I can't believe she didn't show up. I drove 40 minutes to get here. I needed that appointment, and timer goes off. I'm like, dude, I'm still pissed.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, justified. I'm like, see, 5 minutes isn't long enough.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing that happened. after I did it for probably, it was only like a week, which was multiple times a day, right? 5-minute rule, 5-minute rule, 5-minute rule. And I was able to accept it faster and faster and faster. And I literally remember, it was about a week or two after I started practicing the 5-minute rule, and this woman canceled her order. And it was the biggest order I'd ever gotten. It was the last day before orders were due, so I had no chance to make it up. It allowed me to not only reach my goal, but become number one in the office. So I was like celebrating that day. I called my parents. I'm like, Mom, Dad, I was only 19. I'm like, I just reached my goal. I'm the number one rep in the office. They're going to acknowledge me on Wednesday at the team meeting. I'm going to win like a trophy. Like, it's, I was so excited. And she calls that night at 9 p.m. She's like, I'm so sorry. My husband came home. He was mad. I have to cancel the order.
Oh my God.
I'm like devastated. And I set the timer for 5 minutes. At that point, it was like second nature. Whenever I felt emotional turmoil, I would set the timer. And I remember I was like, I can't believe she canceled it. Like, I'm not going to get recognized. I'm not, and I'm like, this sucks. This sucks. Like, what am I going to do? I'm like, the only thing I can do is I can just, accept it and get on because I'd already practiced accepting what I couldn't change. So I'm not joking. I can remember it. I'm like, what else can I do? I have to accept it and move on. And I pick up my phone and look at the timer, and there's 4 minutes and 32 seconds left.
So 28 seconds.
And I'm like, what's the point of me continuing to dwell on something that I can't change?
Yeah.
And this is an important distinction. I realize that every painful emotion we experience is self-created and perpetuated by our resistance to reality. It's wishing that thing didn't happen 5 minutes ago, and the degree that we resist it and wish it didn't happen and say it's unfair and we didn't deserve it, that's not changing it. It's just causing and perpetuating and fostering that emotional turmoil. And so I went, what's the point in being upset for the next 4.5 minutes when I could just accept it, go relax, and get on the phone tomorrow?
For sure.
And in that moment, I realized, not only is 5 minutes enough time, I'm not going to ever waste 5 minutes again being upset. And I remember the distinction. I'm like, I'm going to do the 5-second rule. Give me 5 seconds to be like, mother, never, right? And then be like, well, I can't change it. I'm moving on. And so 1.5 years later, I woke up from a coma and I was told I'm never going to walk again. And I'll be honest, it didn't take 5 minutes. It took like a few days of processing this.
That one takes time.
But it took time, right? But to be fair, literally a few days, and the doctor started saying, they brought my parents in. They're like, we think Hal's in denial. He's like really happy, and he seems jovial, like everything's okay. We believe that he can't handle his new reality. And so my parents approached me and they're like, the doctors think you can't handle it, and they said you need to face the emotions. I'm like, no, I can't change that I was in a car accident. And I said, if I'm in a wheelchair the rest of my life, guys, I've decided, not guys, mom and dad, I said, I've decided I'm going to be the happiest, most grateful person you've ever seen in a wheelchair because I can't change that I'm in a wheelchair, but I can choose my inner experience.
It's amazing.
And I only have one life, and I'm going to enjoy every moment. And the day I was diagnosed with cancer and given a 20% chance of surviving, it was like, I didn't even need 5 minutes, and there were for sure times I cried, over the next year thinking about what if I die and I'm not here for my kids, like, for sure. Like, it's not about like, just everything's fine. Right. But here's what it is. This is wrapping up, tying a bow on this lesson. It's about being able to choose the emotional state that best serves you at any given moment, no matter what's happening. And sometimes it is grieving. Sometimes it is feeling the fear. So you can actually imagine, what do I need to do to prevent the thing that could happen that could cause that fear becoming a reality, right? So for me, being afraid of dying and leaving my kids without a dad, that got me to do 3 coffee enemas a week and take 70 supplements and do lymphatic massage and ozone sauna and organic vegan raw diet. Like, dude, I went all in on every holistic practice known to man. And that's why I'm still alive, I believe. Not because I did chemo, but because I did everything that the doctors didn't tell me to do. That would support my liver and my immune system and detoxify me and my mental health. My miracle morning every morning was focused on beating cancer for like 3 years. Right. And I'm here, to talk about it. So,
well, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, brother.
So good, man. And for those of you guys that haven't gotten it yet, I think you and I want to go get it. Go to Get the Miracle Morning, and it is out now. This is the brand new edition. Went from 150 pages to 250 pages. 220. So sorry, 150 to 220. So there's 70 extra pages in here, and also 15 years of extra wisdom that's put into here as well.
Every page,
every single page expanded, and we'll just say, made better with 15 years of extra wisdom. So, Hal, appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for being here. Love you too, man.
Thank you, Rob.
And everybody, go out and buy the book. We'll see you on the next episode. Good stuff.
You're awesome, dude.
Yeah, me too, buddy. Man, could you not need so much attention while we're in the middle of interviewing?
At least he didn't poop on our shoes, dude.